G'day everybody and welcome back to the shed. Yes, it has been a while. I'll just say I'm back. No, seriously, we've had a lot of things going on in our lives and a lot of little complications that added up to a big break from YouTube. But from here on in, we're hoping to get a pretty good run on it. So I'll fill you in on some of the things in the background and then we'll have a walk around the shed and a catch up with what I've been doing. Just over a year ago, we became grandparents. Now this is a new experience for us and we are the proud grandparents of two bouncing baby boys. Our daughter and our son-in-law became parents, and to all the parents out there, we all know what it's like to have a new baby in the house. Well, with twins, it's double trouble. I have hence called the two twins Trouble and Strife, and you might say which one's called Trouble and which one's called Strife. It's one of those names that fits either at any point in time. And a bit like old mate Fred Dagg and his approximately six sons all named Trevor. With twins, does it really matter what you call each one of them? Yes. So there we go. Now, Deb goes up regularly. Our children don't live locally, so it's a bit of a drive away. Deb's been going up regularly to give them a little bit of respite every fortnight, and so it's taken her away from editing duties. We're sort of looking now at new things where we can do smaller videos more often. We've still got another long one sitting on the editing table that we'll get out with the green ute, and then we'll move forward from there. So we're going to reduce the size of them. We're going to cap everything at around about half an hour, but we want to keep the input and all the fullness of information in there. So we will make them part one, part two, part three, and that way you'll just sort of see it over 2 or 3 weeks. And that way we keep our standards up, but we will fit it into our lifestyles better. So let's have a walk around and see where we're going. First of all, might as well start with the old Kingswood ute. Today I picked this up after a long break, and it's the repair patch we're making for the corner. This was the section we made on our hammer form, and I'm just going to get that welded in there, and I'll prep it all ready to weld, and we'll probably do a bit of a video on putting it in there and move on from there. But I can do all this in the background, get it all ground up, get it ready, and there's a little frame repair to do in there as well. But if we walk over to the car, we can have a look at where we're at with that. Now we've got a bit of a full house at the moment, and mainly because 6 months ago I took on a truck restoration project, and hence the reason for the truck cab down there. But we'll get to that in time. We'll have a quick look at our brown ute, and it's hiding up here in the corner. Just to refresh everyone's memory, here's our door, and there was this hideous great speaker cut out that had been done with an air chisel by the look of it, and all these edges were rolled in all over the place. And I have straightened that out to a degree, but we will be putting in that big section that we just had a look at a minute ago. It'll also replace all this rust down the bottom corner there as well. There's quite a few other little bits and pieces in the frame. Some of them I'm going to treat as a patch repair, others will be a section repair, but I'll keep you up to date on that as we do them, and we'll just keep feeding little bits of information in about the door. So once we get the frame sorted, we'll do a detailed video about welding the skin together. And once again, to refresh everyone's memory, we've made a lower patch for it, and we're going to do a full length weld all the way through the door, and they're always a lot of fun, and they do come up nice on these. I've done a lot of these, so we'll work that through as a step by step, and that one will be a very detailed video. Let's go and look at the truck. This is the cab I took off the truck, and it was a day cab with a separate sleeper box behind it, and I never really liked it. Now, in a former life I was a truck driver. I did that for 9 years of my life, and this was the truck I drove interstate in. I've been all over Australia in it. But when you leave them sit in the shed for nearly 11 years, nobody tells the rust to stop eating the cab away and the mice to stop eating the interior and things like that. So when I decided I would save this, probably not the greatest decision of my life, but it seemed like a good idea at the time, I quickly decided I needed a better cab. But looking at this one, it's rusted all the way through here, both sides. There's rust in the floors, there's rust in the roof and things like that. And I wanted the factory integrated sleeper cab for one simple reason. I'm tall, I'm over 6 foot tall, and I'd fitted a new seat in here, and with the back wall of the cab filled in here, the seat was hard up against it and I didn't have enough leg room. So I decided the easy fix is to take the wall out and open it through to the bunk. Made getting in and out of the bunk really easy. But when I was driving, this corner of the roof was just up above my noggin here, and I was always wary of the fact that if I ever put this truck in the bush, I could lose the back of my head on that. So I was pretty scared about that, to be honest with you. But with the integrated sleeper cab, it's all open through here, there's plenty of room. So I went shopping for one of those and I found one. Well, this is it, guys, but it wasn't really this pretty when I got it. In fact, it was really ugly when I got it. It got revved up a lot before I bought it. It was supposed to be a drop-on cab with one tiny little 20-cent coin sized piece of rust in it. Well, we've all heard those stories before, haven't we? So got it back, and long story short, I spent basically, I'm guessing 8 weeks, 9 weeks welding it back together. So it's had floor, it's had roof, it's had gutters, it's had a lot of stuff. But moving on, that piece is finished and I'm happy with it there. I'm more worried now about my poor old shed, which is just full of truck parts everywhere. All my ute projects have now become shelves and we've got truck parts everywhere. Fortunately, we're only going to build one truck, and once that one truck goes together, all of the parts can go. Big Dave's LTD is finally going to trim. Now, it's going to sound horrendous that I've been waiting a year for trim, but it's starting to become a reality with COVID and things like that. We can't get material. We've had the trimmer with 2 lots of samples got in place to get exactly the right trim that Dave wanted for his car, and they're no longer available, they're not being produced, or they're out of production with no date of when they're going to go back in there. Dave wanted a particular grain vinyl for the roof, which is what we like with custom cars. In Australia, we're very limited for choices, so Dave wound up importing enough material to do the roof from America, and it's a Lincoln pattern, I think, from memory he's using, so it's sort of Ford family as well. So I've just got a few jobs left to do and it's ready to go to the trimmer. This week I've been putting door handles on it, I've painted the nose cone for it. I can't actually fit the front fenders, front guards, without the vinyl roof done, because the vinyl roof runs down the pillars and tucks in behind the top of the guard. So we've got that there to be done. So once it comes back from trim, I can do all the front assembly and things like that and move on with the car. But this week I've been fitting door handles up, got all them on and working nice. They're all new reproduction ones there. Had a little bit of a problem, and I'll share this with you, just for the guys out there with this generation Ford here in Australia. These are just the off-the-shelf repros, but the gaskets that come with them are sort of like a stretchy rubber gasket, and I don't know whether it's shrinkage from sitting in the packaging or what, but they keep wanting to drop in behind the handle every time you bolt it up, and you get it looking nice with the little gasket poking out around the edge. You'd have one corner buried inside, and I just couldn't get it in the end, and I was almost at the point of saying, that's good enough, it's a reproduction part. And then I remembered David actually bought previously a set of gaskets for his car. These ones were a nice formed hard plastic, and they sat very nicely on the handle, and when I put the handle in the door they sat very nicely there. So using those other reproduction ones, which coincidentally came from the same supplier, just as a separate part rather than included in one, we've got a really nice gasket and door handle, and it just works so well. So sometimes it pays to go and buy the same part you've already got, but in a separate packaging, because your supplier could have got it from somewhere else. And even with these, I'll tell you what to look for is if you're looking at the packaging with the gaskets by themselves, you'll feel that they're almost like they are formed hard plastic. Like they will bend, but they're not like a elastic band rubbery sort of thing, which is what the others were. They just flopped around all over the place. So you can pick them up off the counter, have a feel of them and say, yep, these are the ones I want, and your project's going to be much nicer for it. Okay, what else have we got in here? 34 Ford. I have talked about this on videos before, but recently I've just got some new wheels made for lower anvils made for my wheeling machine, and I've got a much better radius for in here. And I took this off, and seriously, it was probably about 5 minutes of wheeling, and I've smoothed all this area in here. I've still got a little tiny recess in here where I've done one of the gathers, and it's just a little bit low there. And I've got a little bit of a high spot through here with a bulge. So hammer and dolly will bring this one down, a little bit of wheeling in this area here, and we'll get that down to good enough. Now, I'm not 100% certain whether I've actually got the curve right this way, But old mate Greg's got one of these utes and he's been talking about coming to visit me for a while, so next time he's here, I'll be cutting some cardboard templates off his roof to see where I'm going. So anytime you want, Greg, come and give me a visit. Okay, so that's about all we've done with that one. Green ute is marginally further ahead than where we were. As I said earlier on, I've got a bit more footage filmed, just waiting for Deb to get, well, Deb's done her part as far as she can. Now I've got to sit down and have a look through and work out exactly where the pieces go before we can finish that off and make it into a video. But I'll give you a little bit of a heads up. We're making the number plate recess. So we've got the little pan that the number plate's going to fit in. It tucks right into the back of the tailgate. That's that piece there. And then we've got this piece half formed, which is going to form the bigger part of the tray that's going to flare forward. And then the next job we'll be doing from that is joining the two together and then forming these edges up around it to make it into the number plate recess. And then all that's really left to be done after that is to get it to glue into there and to the point where we can actually work it. So this is not really that far off. Another little thing on this car, I might just throw this in, it's a little bit secret squirrel at the moment, but seeing as you've all been nice and you've been patient with me, I'll just share that with you. Righto, all the Aussies out there will be aware of the SSV vents on these cars. Anyone else in the world can go and watch the movie Herbie Fully Loaded and you'll see the GTO come screaming around the corner with these vents in the front fenders, front guards. I get into trouble for that. I call them fenders. There's a story behind that, but I do get in trouble. I've got to call them guards apparently because that's what we Aussies do. So I've made this hammer form here. Actually, I'll go back a little bit. I want this tool to flow. The original little fender vent is an insert. It's a formed plastic piece and it clips into a recess in an opening this big. I've never liked the way Holden did it. I thought it looked cheap and tacky. So what I'm doing is building it how I feel they should have made it. So this profile in here I'm making to match the same shape as the plastic insert. I'm going to have to weld up the little light hole here, that'll get smoothed through in there. And then I'm going to make a further recess in here that the little mesh grill will clip into, and then it will have the chrome bar across here with the little repeater light in the side of that. So then it'll just flow into the panel, there'll be no lip around the edge where the plastic panel ends, but also the plastic panel comes back and it's squared off on this end quite a bit more. I've always felt they would look better sloped both ends, so I'm doing that to mine. I'm putting a definite sort of curve in that point there, and I just wanted to find that line down there. So when that chrome bar sits across that, it should look quite nice. So, but I want to build this one to the point where it's all done, and then I'll make a video of doing the opposite side. So that's something fun coming up. Okay, dodgy Dodge. I've got a bit of paint on the Dodge Brothers. Now, this car belongs to Daryl and Suzanne, and I made this tub for it. It was a car that had been previously made into a ute in the Depression, which was pretty common for cars this era. They wanted it restored back to how it was when it left the factory, so I've made a replica tub, mostly from pictures I downloaded off the internet. So we've got that, well, in appearance, accurate to the original. Now, for a long time, they weren't sure of what colour they wanted, and once again, husband and wife car between them. One person's got one idea of what colour it should be, and the other person's got another idea. When they first came and saw me, it was a case of what colours did they come in that weren't black? So black was off the table from day one. They decided on a deep red, maroon sort of colour, and then it was a case of, well, what exactly do you want? And they decided to come and visit me because they don't live locally, and I'd got hold of a colour fan of reds, burgundies, all these sorts of, well, magenta-y sort of colours all the way through to oranges even. And I'd spread it out, we're sitting at the smoko table having a cup of tea. Susie picks it up and almost immediately points and said, it's that one there. And I said, well, take it outside, have a look at it in the sun, make sure you're happy with it. And she come back and she says, no, that's the colour, that's what we want. She showed it to Daryl. Daryl looks at it and goes, oh, okay. And so anyway, the colour was chosen. I said, well, before you commit yourself, I'll do you a little test panel. I'll paint a piece of metal in that colour. I'll put a black strip on one side because it's going to have black mudguards. So I posted that to them, and I didn't hear anything from them for about 6 months. And in the end, it was a case, the car was prepped, ready to paint. I needed to have a decision on what to paint it in. And so I rang them up, and Susie's response was, oh, didn't we get back to you on that? And I said, no, you haven't let me know, you've left me hanging. So anyway, the colour was a hit, and so that's what I've got. This is Sickens Auto Base. Brilliant paint, like it's really good stuff. I've not used it before, and so I was putting it on a bit cautiously. Anything when you do something a little bit different, but it has laid down really nice. This is off the gun. I've done nothing with it apart from wheel it out of the booth and cover it up in the plastic to stop it getting too dirty. So the next big thing for the Dodge will be painting the wheels up. I've got 2 of the rim fellows painted now. I've got the spokes all prepped, ready to go back in there, and I'll do a video of those, probably going together or together. And then from that point, I'll be doing mudguards. So I've got to do the last bit of the prep on the mudguards, and then I'll paint those black. But before the mudguards get painted, I will paint the chassis. I'll put the body on the chassis with the splash shields in place, and then I basically want to take the mudguards out of the booth and bolt them to the car all finished. So we'll keep you up to date with all that as well. Just jumping back to Big Dave's car, and this is the back window for it. So here's another restoration tip that you need to keep in your memory. If you are doing any sort of resto and you're going to put a new rubber seal in for your either windscreen or back window, and this is very typical for all your 1960s, 1970s cars where they use a proper big rubber around the glass. When you're getting close to the time of actually getting the glass fitted to the car, a week or 2 out, get your seals and put them on the glass and just leave them sit on the glass. Make sure you get the corners to sit exactly where you want them. Now, I prefer to leave the mouldings out at this stage because the moulding clips into this groove here, but what you want is the rubber to actually set to the shape of your glass, get these corners all sitting in the right spot, because quite often with a new rubber that's never been out of the packet, you can go to put it on the car and it'll wind up sitting around the corner because it's just the wrong shape. But if we do what we've done here, give them a couple of weeks on the glass and make sure you've got all these things sitting nice and firm in the corners like that, it's going to be much easier for your windscreen fitter to actually put them in the car, whether that is yourself or someone else. They'll be greatly appreciative of that, and it's going to sit in there much nicer with the corners all formed in place. Now, from window rubbers, mouldings. Mouldings are very important. They've nearly always had damage. So I'll just show you the ones off this car. I've done a fair bit of restoration work on those. This is one of the lower mouldings. This one runs, well, this will be the right-hand back corner actually. It sits in, the glass runs up here. So the 2 bottom ones weren't too bad. There was a couple of little tiny dents and things along the edges there, and I've knocked those out and given them a good sand and a polish. You get a lot of spots on these mouldings where something's been dragged across them at some stage in their life, and often it could be something that was sat on the roof of the car and it's rolled down, and they just tend to put lines in them. The best thing to do is to sand them out and polish them. Now, I will sand these, well, I've welded these, so I've started with a grinding disc and worked my way down, but you need to find the finest grade that will cut your scratch out, whether it be 180 or whether it be 240. But like I say, you try with a lesser grade, a finer grade, and if it's not cutting the scratch away, move up to a slightly coarser one. Once you get rid of the scratch that you can see across your moulding, move up to finer and finer grades. These were finished with a 1000 grit disc on the little orbital sander, and just dynabrade up and down to clean up the last of my scratches out of that, and then they're buffed from there. So the corner ones that wrap around the top of the roof, both of these had the boot lid dropped on them, and there's a tiny little mark you can still see in here roughly if you catch it in the light. Someone's let the boot lid slide down the hinges and it's hit the moulding. So both of them had quite a crease in there. And I'll just grab a tool that I use to straighten it, just to give you a bit of an idea of what's involved. As you were. Now you might think repairing mouldings requires tapping away very carefully with a hammer and all sorts of little formers, and I've done it that way in the past, but since then I've moved on, and this is my favourite weapon. This will repair most of the dents I get in mouldings these days, and it's an O-ring pick. And the beauty of it is, you can have a dent, you've got to work from behind, but you can get it into places, particularly like a window moulding. You can slide it in behind there and use the point to lever up. I quite like this area here, and I'll just get into like an open moulding, get in there with my finger on it and just work it backwards and forwards with a heap of pressure on there. And you can even make it a little bit raised in the top and just tap that down again if you have to, particularly if you're working like a line out where something's been dropped into it. But this does most of my moulding repairs. Little AMG's back in the shed. It's got a fuel pump issue, fuel pressure issue. Haven't had time to look at that yet. These have the fuel pressure regulator built into the fuel filter. I did replace the fuel filter at one stage, and it's not a Bosch one, it's not a genuine one, it's just a generic aftermarket. So I'm hoping that it's just a crook filter with a dodgy regulator in it causing the problem. So first job is to belt another fuel filter on it, drive the car, see what it does. But 200,000 Ks on the clock, there's a fair chance the fuel pump's worn out. So either way, it's one of those things, and that'll fix the little Merc. I've had a bit of time on the white ute that I haven't really shared much with, and it's all been subframe work. And being a bit of a truck shelf, we're not going to be able to get some good shots of it, but we can see the post on the other side that I've replaced and made by hand and welded that in. That's all set in the right spot. Whenever you're doing any subframe repairs, it's very important that they are aligned to the car. Now this particular subframe, if you'd bought a new one, would have come with no bolt holes in the top here, and it would have had the ones in the bottom of the legs in place. So when you would put a new one on the car back in the day, you would put the bottom bolts in, you would bring it up onto the body. There was, I've heard this from several sources, I'm not 100% certain on how accurate it was, there was a self-tapping screw up in this top corner with the hole that had been punched. That was supposed to be accurate, according to what I'd been told. You would put that screw in, and then you would re-drill these holes from the inside out through there for the other bolts. But I've had these subframes where that screw just physically won't go in, it's too far out, so I discount that. The workshop manual will give you the dimensions off the line through the bottom of the car up to the front of the rail to work from. So that's all I do, and I just string line them. I pull a builder's strict line through, put it on something forward of the car, get it at the right height so it parallels the bottom of the car, and then I'll use that to measure up to the front of the subframe, keep lifting it on a jack until it's in the right spot, clamp it in this top corner, drill my holes, the job's done. So on this car, both sides have been done. I have had the front guards on the car and they fit. I've had the doors on the car, all the gaps line up. And that's probably the cheekiest way to do a subframe repair. Is you could leave all these bolts out, you could put your front guards and your doors on, you could creep the front up until your door gap worked, and then you're going to say, well, I've got a straight gap here, I've got a straight gap there. It's good enough because we're going to get the car to work at that, even if it is a little bit out. So that's another way of doing it.
Agricultural.
You are correct. A little bit agricultural, but you'd get away with it. Okay, everyone, that's pretty much what we've been up to. We're looking forward to a bigger year in 2022 than what we've had up to date, and we will bring you a lot more videos. I also want to vary the content some more. Now, I started out in this rough ride through the mechanical industry as a tractor and truck mechanic. I trained as an auto electrician, I've worked as a bus mechanic, I've worked as truck mechanics, car mechanics, I've done all sorts of things. And the sheet metal, although it is my passion and I've taught myself with it, it's something that if you're doing it all day for your everyday job and you've suddenly got to do a video on the weekend, I'm often burned out a bit on that. So we'll throw a few mechanical things in as well just to liven it up. It'll all be tumbling down that same sort of a road. I'm Rob Teal. Thank you very much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.